everyone. We are doing the masterclass today with Isabelle Knight and her Build Your Brand Masterclass. I'm so excited for Isabelle to be joining us today and to be sharing with us her expertise on building your publishing brand. Welcome, everyone. And we are going to let Isabelle get started. So, Isabelle, take it away.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all. Thanks, everyone, for joining us this evening, or good morning, or good afternoon. It's evening for me, but it's probably daytime for a lot of you. Now, I'm going to kick off with a presentation for you all. I think I'm probably not going to share the slides. I'm just going to talk to you. So we'll do that. Does that work for you, Danica? Yeah, great. All right. To introduce myself properly to all of you, possibly some of you know me already, but I'm Isabelle Knight. So I am a publicist with 2 decades of experience working in the TV, film, entertainment, books sectors, with a client list that includes JK Rowling and the BBC. I've basically worked with some huge global brands throughout my career and big A-list stars. About 3 years ago, I started working with authors who did not already have big brands and were not already well known, because I realized that the kind of knowledge and resources that I took for granted as a publicist, these are not commonly known, and there's tons of knowledge that authors are just not privy to when they're going ahead and trying to do their own marketing and promotion. So why do you need an author brand? Let's kick off with this. Congratulations, you've written a book, you're an author. If you've got this far in your journey, well done to you. And if you've managed to have your book published, it might be small press, it might be completely indie published, it might be through a self-publishing hybrid model. And you might even have told your friends and family and even posted on your Facebook profile to tell everyone about your great achievement. Is it time to crack open the champagne? There's just one thing. Have you thought about how people will buy your book if they don't know about it? Have you thought about who your book is for? How will they know to buy it? How will they know to find it and actually read it? So these are the important questions that we're asking ourselves when we have a book that we're publishing, that we're putting out into the world, and we want to find an audience for it. So why do you need an author brand and an author brand story if you're an author? This is the key ingredient behind every brand, product, service, or book that conveys your messaging. It attracts your ideal reader, and that will ultimately give you the best chance at gaining attention for your book. Your brand story provides your potential or ideal reader with the why they should care about your book. It will lead to you being confident and clear in your marketing, in your messaging, and in any potential media coverage that you will gain. It will give your book credibility and authority. So ultimately, for marketing, promotion, and PR, for all of the things, all the tools and the different ways that you can put your book out there and find readers, the key component that we need to draw our readers to us, to want to read and buy a copy of the book, to want to find out more, is to offer up our story. So that's the story behind the story. I'm just going to keep my eye on comments as well as we go through. But yes, if questions come up as I'm talking, if you jot them down and then I'll come back to them at the end. I might come to some questions whilst I'm going through the presentation as well. So what is the purpose of the author brand story? And what is it exactly? So it's not enough to say what your book is about or indeed who it's for. You may have heard the classic line that people buy from people. Marketers like to talk about this a lot. But what that means in practice is that readers and audiences will always connect with the human element of a brand, with the person, the ethos, the culture, the message behind the product or the book as much as with themselves. Your brand is not just about your personality or about how friendly you are, nor is it about how good your book is. Bad books get sold every day of the week, every day of the year, and they build up readerships and they build up audiences. So your brand and the success of your book is not determined by the quality of the book itself, which is a sad thing in a lot of cases, but that's just one kind of point to remember. And your author brand story tells us, how did you get here, right now, today, having either written a books or even planning to become an author? What was your journey? What's your journey been? What have the steps been to bring you to the point you are at now, and the motivations that brought? And I want you to answer these questions when you leave this presentation and go away and have a think about this to yourself. There are 3 questions that can help to lead your thoughts on this. So they are: why you, why here, and why now? So those are 3 kind of leading questions that I often encourage the authors I work with to think about. Now, I mentioned at the top that I've worked with kind of famous names, and one of those is JK Rowling, who I mentioned. This is actually a really good example of somebody who's used brand stories, the story behind the story, to grow that profile and help to grow a following. With the Harry Potter books, we all know that this is kind of folklore now, that she was a struggling single mum, didn't have an awful lot going on, and wrote those books to try and better her own life. We're talking about fantasy books that take you into an alternative reality. With the Strike series, that was JK Rowling writing under the name of Robert Galbraith. Again, we had a story behind a story. So we had a very famous author, very famous for children's books, wanted to turn things around, to pivot into a new genre, and created a pseudonym, created a kind of alter ego in order to do that, to create a mystery behind the mystery books. So these are very famous examples, but starting to give you that idea that it's the story behind the story that the reader is going to connect with first. So what needs to go into your author brand story when you're doing this for yourself? So the reader needs to be able to emotionally connect with your story. It's too easy, in fact, to hide behind your book, which is your product, hiding behind your book and concentrating on the what and the how. Authors love to tell potential readers all about what the book is about, what the characters are, the plot arcs, etc. But rather than concentrating on the book itself, why you have written your book is actually what's going to pique that reader's interest first, before they have to go away and pick it up and actually read it. So the why behind why you've written the book you have, why you chose the genre you chose. What is it about this story that drew you to it in the first place? Because that is more than likely going to be the same motivation that will draw your reader to it. And you don't need to create a story that is going to impact the whole world. So we don't need to be JK Rowling's. We don't need to tell a story that's going to be kind of headline news. Your story only needs to resonate with your ideal reader. So telling your story is not about forcing yourself to share your personal thoughts and private experiences. But what it is about is you creating and curating your story that demonstrates your values. So what you believe in as the author of your books, and using examples from your own experiences in your own life that can illustrate these. But you're always in control of what you share with your audience, and that's really important. So it's not just about kind of excavating your whole life and putting it out there for the world to see. It's about deciding which examples and experiences are you going to use to illustrate your point for your reader. So when we've really got to grips with our author brand story and we've kind of got under the skin of it, the practical uses of the author brand story, and this is why we can start to see how important this is in engaging with your ideal reader, is it can start to form the basis of all of your communications. So that can include your website copy, and many authors that do this work with me start with their about me on their website. It can go into any blog posts if you have a Substack, social media posts, podcast interviews. It can also form the basis of traditional media pitches, so things like press releases and pitches to newspapers, magazines, radio, TV. You'll find that you use it when you're speaking in person. So you might speak at book festivals or writers' events, that kind of thing, conferences, or even talks and readings in your local bookshop. And these are all ways that you can potentially engage with your readers. So I want to give you a few practical starter tips for going out there and promoting yourself as an author, because you won't hear me talk much about algorithms, and I certainly don't endorse the use of ads before you've figured out your marketing strategy that underpins all the activities you're doing. So if you get your author brand story, get what you want to say about your author brand fixed first, then we can start to build layers on that, and that can include things like ads. Some ways you can promote yourself: interview opportunities, speaking about your book, speaking about yourself as an author, a tremendous way of immediately getting readers interested in your work. So looking for podcast opportunities, talk opportunities, like we've said, book festivals, fairs, conferences, any media interview opportunities. And this is where we want to start thinking about where your reader is hanging out. When it comes to book reviews, I know book reviews is something that many authors really struggle with. But rather than just asking family and friends to do reviews, research the book reviewers and the bloggers that you know are reviewing books in your genre, and maybe even reviewing books by self-published authors as well as traditionally published authors. For example, finding them on social media, BookTokers. BookTok is a great way of finding reviewers and bloggers who are working in your genre. They tend to cover your genre of book. Now, offering to send people a free copy, whether that's digitally or a hard copy of your book, is a great way of, first of all, starting to create a relationship with them. And relationships are really key. But it's always a good policy to write people first and check that they are willing to receive a copy before you go ahead and send one to them. But introducing yourself, offering to provide copies of the book for review, and researching those reviewers, thinking about the genre of book and who is reading your book. And this is another point that I really work on with authors, is figuring out who your readers are. But doing your research. So I urge every author to really do your research, listen to the podcasts and read the blogs that you think are covering your book topics and appealing to your ideal reader. So again, thinking about who is reading your books. And often when I say to authors, who do you think your ideal reader is? They'll often say, oh, it's everyone that enjoys reading, or everyone that enjoys reading in my genre. But we want to get really specific about this. Research-wise, I also want you to follow any journalists or reviewers that you wish were writing about you and your book. So, aiming high, going for journalists that you know cover books, again, in your genre, whether it's fiction or non-fiction. All of this advice applies to both. When you see a journalist writing an article that you've admired, or you see them post something on social media, engage with them. Compliment them on something they might have written about a book or an article they've written. Direct engagement will go a long way to forming connections. And later, when you come to maybe do pitches, for example, to media, telling people that you've read or listened to their work is a really key thing to mention when you are pitching to somebody. In the same way that pitching to agents or publishers, if you're telling them that you follow their work, that you are a fan of the authors they represent, showing people how you're following them and how you're interested in their work is really important to get their attention. And if you do get reviewed, or if a blogger puts something about your book, or a journalist writes something, always say thank you. If they've given your book a write-up, or they've mentioned you or your book in some way, always say thank you, always follow up, like make a direct connection, whether that's through social media, whether it's dropping them an email, but forming a relationship with the media in any way you can is absolutely key to beginning to create that author profile for yourself. So remember, your brand is essentially about growing your profile. So it's knowing who you are as an author, what you stand for, what the values are, and then growing that profile so that more readers have an idea of who you are as the author, and by extension, what they can expect from your books. Contacting your local media. So I can see that we've got people from all over the world online today. But wherever you are in the world, looking at your own local media, I always say to authors, start with where you are. Newspapers, magazines, they are always keen to champion local people. And even on a national level, they're keen to champion people in their country or in their city, in their town, who are making a success of themselves, whether that's creatively or financially. But picking up the phone to people, and this is something that nobody thinks of doing anymore. But actually, picking up the phone works, social media works, to get in touch with editorial teams. These are the people that actually decide which stories make it into media articles. The unsung hero of media is radio, and I've always been a fan of radio. I started my career in radio, so I'll always love radio. But calling up your local or regional radio station, explaining that you are an author in the local area, and introduce them to your brand story and your book. They might be interested to interview you, and they may even have a segment that would be suitable for giving a short reading. And remember that radio has a lot of airtime to fill, and loads of authors who've worked with me have had success with their local radio stations. And often it's as simple as getting involved and asking the question. So if authors everywhere made use of their local media in this way and engaged with their local media, we would see a lot more authors gaining bigger profiles. Author who's worked with me, Lauren Malone, is a non-fiction author. So she's a coach, and she wanted to write her book, The Expecting Entrepreneur, that she hybrid published. The story behind her book was that she was pregnant. She wanted to set up a business of her own. She couldn't find any advice anywhere, Googling how to set up a business when you're pregnant, nothing coming up. So she decided to write her own book about her experience that would help future female entrepreneurs who were raising families at the same time. Lauren has really successfully worked with the media here in the UK, and is now even a regular contributor to her local radio station. So she's at the point where they now call her up and say, oh, we're going to be talking about this today. Do you fancy coming on air and chatting with us on this topic? So that's one example of someone who's really made a good success of that. Promoting your author brand and your work, both now and into the future. Creating your author brand and your author profile gives you credibility as an author. It also gives you authenticity and authority in your field of writing or genre. And to achieve this, your publicity and your marketing strategy is absolutely essential. Researching your audience, researching your potential readers, thinking about who that ideal reader is going to be, creating a strategy, knowing what to say about yourself as an author, So knowing who you're speaking to and what you're going to say about yourself, because we're not going to hide behind the books themselves and just concentrate on what's the book about, what's the content of the book. Because what we want to think about is, if you've got, say if you're a fantasy writer and you've got 10 books that are all in that genre and all dealing with similar, similar kind of storylines, similar tropes, what are we going to say about if your book is in that lineup, what are we going to say about it to make it different, to make it unique for that reader to choose? And the thing that makes it unique is you, and you as an author, and your author story, and how you came to be the author of that particular book. So that's always what I want you to be thinking about, is how are you making your author brand unique, therefore your books unique? And learning how to get clear on that, and then working that into how you pitch yourself. So whether that's to agents or publishers or to the media, and having a bank of evidence behind you when you are pitching to publishers or agents, perhaps in the future. But even to boost your credibility as an author, any media coverage that you do get, that includes press or broadcast or online, gives you that credibility, because it's essentially getting a third party to vouch for you, which is not the same as social media when it's all coming from you. It's your own mouthpiece. So having other coverage or other platforms where people have vouched for you, reviews work in this way. It shows that you have an audience. It shows that there is interest in your work from other people, from readers. And all of this is always going to play a key part in not only publishers and agents' decision making, but in retailers' decision making, in terms of whether you are an author they would like to work with and invest in. And again, retailers, I know that loads of authors come to me with the belief that self-published authors can't get into bricks and mortar retailers, and this is just not the case. I have authors working with me who've been in bricks and mortar retailers for years now, because they've built up those relationships with their retailers, and it's all based on the same principles of how are you presenting yourself as an author, and therefore your work. I'm going to come to questions in a moment, because I can see there are some, which is great. Right, so but yeah, I'm going to come to questions now, because that's the bulk of what I want to say to you. I will let you know at the end how you can work with me if you do want to build up your author brand. So Danica, I'm going to come to these questions now. We've got a question from Kevin. How about contacting a journalist of the national paper I use in my book, where my main character is a journalist? I think that is a tremendous idea. I think that's a brilliant idea, and you should definitely do that. And that brings me to another point. I often encourage the authors who work with me to make the most of any name checking they've done in their books. And often authors do this without any ulterior motive. They'll put in the name of a shop or a place, or as you've done with a newspaper. So contact them. If you're publishing your book, let them know, oh, I mentioned you in my book. Would you like a copy to read for yourself? Would you like to see it? And authors who've worked with me have done things like do book launches. They've worked in partnership with people that they've mentioned in their books. So definitely, that's a great idea. If you're writing a book about a journalist who works for a real life national paper, get in touch with them, let them know. The next question, which is a question I get a lot, I'm glad you've asked it. What if you write in different genres? This is a great question. Now, if you're writing in different genres, I know this often sounds incredible when I first say it, but your author brand story actually covers all of your genres. I've got authors who work in wildly different genres, so they might be doing steamy romance and children's books, for example. How can it possibly be the same person writing these two genres? Now, of course, we're going to adapt our marketing for different genres, and we're not always going to be speaking to the same readerships or the same audiences. But if you do your author brand story correctly, then we're going to be able to weave that into the different genres that you're writing in, because we don't need to become different people. It's the same person writing in these genres, and often the motivations, your underlying personal passions and motivations for writing, are going to cover all of your genres, and in fact everything you do. I often say this applies when people have different businesses as well, for example. So one of my authors writes romance and children's books. And what we discovered was that in her author brand story, what she's really concerned with is helping people to reach their potential. So in her romance books, she's got women who are in really difficult situations and they want to get out of those to reach happier lives. With her children's books, she's really passionate about getting reluctant readers to read. So we start to see that there's lines, there are threads of stories running through as an author, that we adapt and change it for those genres, but essentially it's still giving you that kind of bedrock foundation of who you are as an author and helping you to figure out how do you speak about yourself as an author. And the same if your book is cross-genre. Again, we don't want to worry too much about being specific about genres, because the genre is not the thing that sells the book. Again, it's the story behind the story. So if your book is cross-genre, then even more interesting. We can get even more interesting about the author brand story. Why is the book cross-genre? So if you work with me, I'm always going to be asking you why. So why is it this? Why did you decide to do that? Amy, I had a bad experience with one of my local newspapers. A crazy man showed up at the front door asking me to write his true crime story. I haven't contacted local media outlets since. That definitely sounds like a bad experience. But what's really important, Amy, is to find the right person that you want to speak to at the paper. Make sure that it's editorial. Make sure it's somebody who writes about arts, who preferably writes about books. So I think it's really key to get hold of the right people. And often local media are really enthusiastic to tell local stories. So always introduce yourself as a local author. Right, next question with Layla. What if you already have a public profile in your professional area, but your book is about a different topic that would appeal to an audience with minimal crossover? So if you already have a public profile, so it sounds like you're saying you would want to keep the two very separate. You can keep the two very separate. Going into your professional profile, you probably haven't gone into the same sort of level of personal motivations. We're talking about what are the emotions that drive you to writing, which is not probably something that you've gone into detail on in your professional profile. So I would advise just put the professional profile to one side and concentrate on digging into that author brand story. If it's an audience with minimal crossover, I wouldn't worry too much. But I mean, that's kind of a separate question, because there's always more crossover, I think, than people think with audiences. Because at the end of the day, if you do have an audience, they are going to be curious, they're going to be interested. But yeah, I probably need to know a little bit more detail to help you fully with that, Layla. We'd probably need to go into a bit more specifics on that. Concentrate on what drives you to writing that's probably separate from your professional area initially, or it's been separate, and then you'll probably start to see the threads that actually link the two things. Ray, you feel like you struggle to pitch your story since it doesn't seem to fall into a single genre. Yeah, again, don't worry about genres. I think genre is often misleading. We don't need to fit into specific genres. Your author brand story isn't about genre. It's about you specifically, uniquely, what brings you to write about what you're writing about. So put the genre question aside while you're doing the work of, remember the three questions: why you, why here, why now, answering those. If you're Kerry and you're in the drafting stages of your book, what can you be doing online to build a profile alongside the writing process? A newsletter definitely helps, but remember, a newsletter is a tool. Social media is a tool. A newsletter is a tool. Substack is a tool. These are all methods to reach an audience, to market to people. But the most important thing to do before you've decided what tools you're going to use, is to figure out what you're going to say. What do you want to start telling people about who you are as an author and about your writing? You can talk about the writing process, because you can talk about, what it means to you to be writing the thing you're writing. So that's what I would start to talk about with your audience, and then you're going to attract those ideal readers to you. Your other writing: TV, dramas, song lyrics, poems, and novels. The author brand story work will underpin all of these. There'll be threads that bind all of the different kinds of writing you're doing. So getting to grips with that is going to really, really help you. Kerry, I'm glad that helped. Angelica, what about non-fiction and fiction writing? To differentiate your pen name with reference to your real name. So it sounds like, Angelica, you've already created kind of different brands, effectively, whether we call them avatars or pen names. We're kind of writing under different brand names, essentially. But what we can do, we can combine them. So again, you don't need to pretend to be lots of different people writing at the same time, writing different things at the same time. But what we can do is get that author brand story that underpins, and then we can adapt it and adapt the way you talk about it for each of those genres. So if you wanted to then just use one name, then you could, because people would start to understand why you're writing in these different genres. So the author's story, when I do this work with authors, we start off by saying, well, first of all, you put all sorts of marketing and publicity out of your mind in order to do it. You're just writing a story. So initially, it's kind of free writing. I know as a writer, it's really difficult to write without editing yourself. But initially, your author brand story wants to be a free written piece that you can then edit down. I often say to people, when you get to 1,000 words, stop and then start to edit. Then you can start to edit. An ideal length is going to be about 500 words. And then ideally, you'll want something even shorter than that you can start to put into pitches. So it'd be about 300 words in the end. So it's short, but it will start long and it will get shorter. Kevin, you have IMDb Pro link as your novel is in early talks with producer and screenwriter. Great. So even in your IMDb Pro, you can use your author brand story to help you with that in terms of how you're presenting yourself as a novelist.
Thank you, everyone,
Okay,
for
I think
being
we've got one more
patient.
question. You're a very private person, as are many, many authors, so you're not alone in that. You've been concerned about sharing the behind the scenes of your novella. So again, it's the difference between it's not your personal story, and it's not necessarily behind the scenes. So I'm not asking you to go on social media and tell everyone every personal detail about your life. That's not what this is. But it's thinking about what motivates you to write. And quite often, it's passions, motivations that start in childhood for many people. But it's thinking about what motivates you, and then using illustrations that you decide from your personal experiences to show people that. And I've got authors who have maybe a really painful personal story that is shaping who they are as an author. But we don't have to get into personal details. What we want to do is convey the emotions of it, the values of it. It's that's going to connect with your audience. The emotions are what's really important, because the emotions are what other people are also going to resonate with and to connect with. So I hope that makes sense. I've just seen this question. Using a dozen genres in a book is because of ADHD. Should that be part of your brand too? If that is part of your motivation for writing, then yes, that can absolutely be part of your brand. But again, it's up to you how you talk about it and how you illustrate that. Even the IMDb bot thinks you're two different people. That's good. Yeah. Okay, so the three questions when you leave this session and you go away and have to think about this, get a blank piece of paper and think to yourself, why you? So that's the first one. Why are you writing this? Why here? So, in the space that you're in, that could be the place you're living in, where you are in the world, why here? And why now? So it's a kind of, why you in this time and in this space? What is it about right now that you're writing the thing you're writing? Can you use pop group in your book to promote a pop? If you've name checked a pop group, I mean, you can try, definitely. Get your pitch sorted first. Remember, it's always about the pitch and what you're going to say in that pitch. At a hook, you used storyteller of the American experience. You labeled yourself as charismatic. Does this come off as religious? From what you've just said, that's very hard to determine. But if you want it to come off as religious, then think about how you're going to convey that. Thank you. Great. I hope that's been useful, and I hope it makes sense. Great. Thank you all for watching.
Yes, everyone, thank you so much for coming. It has been really great having you. I know we've had a few little tech hiccups, and hopefully we will have it sorted next time we do it. I'm confident but I loved this information from Isabelle. And for those of you who came in late or would like to watch it again or would like to share it with some friends, we will have a replay available. So feel free to watch that and share that when you are ready to do that. And I'm just going to give it back to Isabelle for a little bit of a closing from her, and I will wrap it up for you.
So thank you. If you've already followed me on socials, that is fantastic. So you'll find me on all the main social media channels. If you want to go to my website, it's buildyourbrandwithpr.com. I'll get some slides over to you, I think, with the recording. That's probably the best thing to do. And I'm running a 6-week online course where you get live time with me answering your questions as well for authors. And that will begin on the 27th of February. So if you want to go to my website, you can see more information on that as well. But thank you all very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Isabelle. I learned so much. I know else did as well. And for those of you who are not Publish Drive customers, send out the replay and everything. We're also going to give you a 25% off coupon for our annual plan. So be on the lookout for that. If you're looking for some distribution options for your books, between us getting you in multiple markets and being able to give you some great publicity tips, you are definitely on the right course for author success. Thank you all again. It has been lovely having all of you. We appreciate all of your time. We will talk to you again.